Yeah, today, as I just said before we went live here, I really doubt my own judgment and ability to make decisions today because I've turned the tables on the show because Jennifer Ryan, who was in the show some couple of months ago, a great episode. You should go back and check that out. We'll put it in the show notes. She said to me, I can't remember, it must be after our conversation, said, what about if we turn the tables, Michael, and I interview you about why you're doing what you're doing? And I thought, that's a great idea. I said, and then afterward, I started thinking, is this actually, have I actually made the right decision? But here we are today. I'm leaning into it because I'm sure I'm going to see something different from this side of the table. And I know from my conversation with Jennifer, she will ask some very good questions because I think she asked question back as a guest as well, which is very unusual when you interview people ask back. And I thought that was quite interesting. So, welcome back, Jennifer. And thank you for putting me in the hot chair.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It was so fun last time. And I only was able to scrape the surface in terms of the why behind you, the pod, the work that you've done. And, as a curious learner, I wanted to know more. Offline, you gave me a lot of great book recommendations, some good advice.
Yeah. The books. Yeah.
And I thought the audience could maybe benefit from getting a deeper dive into Michael. So that was the point of today.
Yeah, and it's gonna be exhilarating because actually it's funny. I just want to say this to the audience: even though if you run a podcast, it's actually quite scary to be on the other side. So I feel a bit challenged, but we'll dive into it. So where should we start?
Well, I want to start at the beginning, if that's okay. Can you just back up and perhaps for my reference to everyone else's? Tell me how you entered into the world of hospitality. When did you start becoming obsessed with food, the culture, and maybe the leadership? But take us back to that moment. Was there a point or was this just part of who you were?
Well, most people, they say they fall into the industry. I was born into the industry. My mom ran restaurants, pubs, fast food outlets. And it was not like a restaurant chain. It was just like this family thing she was doing. Principle to take care of living and be a free person in the southern parts of Denmark. And she was doing that reasonably well. And I was, I don't know how old I've been, 8 weeks, because my mom had to go back to work. It was her own business. I was in the pub, while my mom was cleaning in the day, getting ready for the night. And so I was in hospitality from day one in a way. And then I grew up in it and I got at some point with my parents, they had this spot on a square in this local little town. I'm not going to pronounce because southern parts of Denmark, 20,000 inhabitants, really remote. They had this sausage trailer that was rolled out every Saturday and sometimes Sundays and on, bank holidays and so on. And we're selling sausages out of this. It was a very known cuisine in Denmark. If you come to Denmark, land in Copenhagen, we see these sausage trailers selling a variety of sausages and bread on the side and so on. And that was my little business when I was 15 years old. So my dad learned me very simple P&L skills. So I had to earn a profit to go and buy something and actually get a salary. At that point, I didn't understand what he was learning me. He was actually learning me to run a business. And then I bought my first, I would call it new bike and new stereo and basketballs and NBA clothes. We were talking with probably some American audience. I'm a very big basketball fan. I play basketball. And then my mom got a really bad situation with her back. So she had to actually run down some of her businesses and start selling them off. And then ended with she couldn't really work. So I ended up with, my mom told me when I was 15 that, the sausage trailer is going, it's going with that business and you need to get a job. But don't worry, I found you a job. You're going to go and work for Paul that's opening McDonald's restaurants. And this is the early 90s. McDonald's, what is that in Denmark? It was not a thing yet. It was something that was in the capital, something I visited in Paris. I know what a Big Mac was. And I didn't really want to go because I was working in my mom and dad's business. I really liked it. So I started, there was no mom is always right. And you do what your mom tell you. And you go and work for Paul. And that was probably the best thing my mom had done for me because when I looked back today, I maybe started cleaning the loos, but very quickly I grew through the McDonald's ranks. And before I was was probably before I was 19 or was 19, I was running, shifts and had lots of responsibility, learning to manage people. We sent on leadership courses. And then suddenly I was running, a restaurant, or running multiple restaurants. That led me into the head office at some point, and then into HR, operation, technology, both in Denmark and the UK. So I had about more than a decade with McDonald's, about 12 years in total, on and off. And then, also spent a quite big stint with a Danish cafe chain, organic coffee and the art of coffee making. So this is the early 2000s, back on that wave of coffee and new food. So that's a very entrepreneurial environment, very different from McDonald's. And very quickly I progressed there from, I was just meant to go in and be part of helping them launching one restaurant. So suddenly I was in there and I was running restaurants. I was ops director, then I became people director, and then ops and people director at the same time. And that was actually where I started, you talked a bit about leadership and culture, started to become really interested in how can I apply this kind of approach to people. I actually very early picked up in McDonald's that if you're very good at people, you run some very good shift, you run some very good restaurants, and you deliver some very great results. And how do you become the best at that? So I started taking my own thinking from that. And then at the same time, I was finishing my degree at university because I thought, I'm not going to do hospitality the rest of my life. So I need to have a degree in something. But how wrong was I? But I took more, that's also why all the books are there. I took a more, technical, theoretical approach to how to build an organization. I took all these learnings with me into my leadership job. There was one book that really defined everything. It was called Good to Great, or still called Good to Great, by Jim Collins, and really set the tone for what kind of organization I would be like to be part of it. And I did that with that coffee chain and cafe chain. And we took it from 4 to 27, built on the principles of Good to Great. And that actually starts with, level 5 leadership. And that means, leadership where you, in principle, find out how can you actually get the best out of others. And that means the traditional top-down leadership Christmas tree model doesn't work. You need to have a bottom-up approach where you get people involved in the solution. So that set out the journey. And then, done some consultancy within the industry, launched a podcast, run my own catering business before the pandemic, where my customers like Airbnb and Citizen M hotels in London were called the Bear Kitchen. Now I'm involved in something they call the Pulse Kitchen, where we're selling meal solution to food service operators. You think Aramark, you think Compass Group, Sodexo, where chefs get these in to help them produce better plant-based options that's natural, without actually having to have lots of complexity around it. They just make some rice and salad. So it's, again, different aspects of hospitality and food. And that's been the line all the way through. I've had a bit of a stint into some tech, but I've always been either an HR angle or a hospitality angle on these tech businesses. So never left the industry. And I have a big passion for making this industry the greatest industry it can be. And that we can only do that by taking our businesses from good to great.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one. I have so many questions because of your background, but I'd love to dig into something. You started with doubt. That was what you kicked off the podcast with. And yet, as an outsider looking in and listening at the story that you just outlined, those decades of work, it certainly seems like you had a lot of confidence to have zero skills walking into an industry. You had deep knowledge from around you. You had a few reps under your belt, perhaps as a 15-year-old, but truly had never worked in a big environment like this. Was this confidence? Was this mentorship? Was this right place, right time? Was this you learned how to implement systems for yourself? I mean, walk us through those leaps that you made into different roles, titles, leadership. What was it that allowed you to propel to the next level time after time after time? Before
really, I was like, there's something you can see I'm thinking, and it's because I'm thinking, where should I actually start? Because it's quite funny. I don't think a lot of people know that, but I was not very successful to go back to school, all the way up to university, where I actually find my thing is strategy and leadership. My grades explode because I'm like a fish in water. And I really struggle. And actually, I think where I felt very comfortable. And the doubt, the move from my mom's business to McDonald's, I probably had a lot of because I was afraid they were going to figure out I'm not very good. We have to think back now. But that was not what I was thinking. I was 15 years old. So I was just scared. And I'll probably, if people think back to listen here, I work with McDonald's, and I think, oh, he was the shy boy over there that just put his head down and worked. And that's probably right. That's who I was. But actually, McDonald's gave me that confidence in myself. And I think I said to you just before we went on that Americans or American culture are very good to build the individual and put them in front and talk for themselves. And I think that actually some of the McDonald's culture gave me that. But they also gave me a platform and system to feel safe in. And that made me believe in myself. And I progressed all the time, slowly but surely. And I got some system. And then I think I've always been glad, even though I was not successful in school, I actually liked reading. And I think reading and exploring things made me understand that actually there's a different way. So reading every day now is a thing. And now it's become about how you build these great organizations, but it could have been about anything. And to build a great organization, you need to, start here. It's about how do you become great? How do you become the best version of yourself? So some of the doubt and it's still there, the doubt, by the way, it's not disappeared. There's lots of things I would doubt about all the time. And I just actually, funny, if we done this episode, 6 weeks ago, I was a lot of doubt, crossroads, should I stay or should I go kind of conversation, I am the right person to do this, and one of my mentors said to me, well, as we just talked about before we started this conversation, that you just need to push through sometimes this uncomfortable phase where you'll find out you are the right one. That's why you're here. And then, obstacle is the way. Ryan Holiday's book is all about that. You push through these things and you find out it's not that bad anyway. And you got clarity about the next move. So I think it's not been given to me. And I think when I think back, I probably worked very hard from it. But it was not like a career. Ooh, yeah, there was actually one point, I wanted to be the CEO MD in McDonald's. There's no doubt about that. I was like an aspiration. Then I found out that didn't really fit with the entrepreneurial spirit. There was some kind of conflict and my deep values about what kind of business I want to build and what kind of impact. And McDonald's is great, done lots of great things for me. And then something happened as well. You always meet somebody on your journey that pulls you somewhere. And I thought, that's inspirational. And I think I was reading about Danny Meyer was one of them and well known. And then there was also, I was reading about this company called Singerman's in Ann Arbor many years ago. I read Small Giants. I thought, that's interesting companies. How can you build them? And that's probably what pulled me out of corporates into the more entrepreneurial. And then, the thing about making a positive impact in society and planet came later as I thought there's something not working in the world. And as businesses, we have all this money and resource. We have a responsibility. And then slowly it all came together on the journey to, in principle, what the podcast talks about today, what great leaders know and do to build businesses as a force for good in the world. Great impact on people, community, and planet. And very important, they need to make a profit. Because I'm all in for philanthropist and all that stuff, but you need to make the money to give money away in principle. And that's where it comes from. So I think really it all drives actually from I started with doubt, funny enough, and obstacles, doubt, and actually saying also, I think more older I get, the quicker I come back from these periods where I said, no way, it's not going to stop me. I'm going to get better working through this. I don't know where it's going to end, but I'm going to work through it. Even though other people say, oh, leave the table, go and do that instead, make it a bit easy for yourself. But you will hate yourself if you have that drive as an entrepreneur, the doubt really to drive through it, the use doubt to drive through these obstacles. And then you will, hopefully, when you look back at that time, we're all going to end, we're all going to die, and we're going to look back and look at our legacy and the impact and the people we met and how we touched them. That we actually did really live the fullest, potential of ourselves. So it's probably come back to, I think I've been circling a bit around, but it actually comes back to how do you actually become your best version of yourself and how can you use doubt to drive that? Great question, by the way.
It's So amazing to watch that journey that you've been on. And I can imagine the young kid quietly working with his head down. Because at the end of the day, you've got to do the work, right? You've got to do the work. But
Yeah.
I think what you said resonates so much with me because as I found in my own journey, confidence is learned and earned. And I have found that I've had to go and have as many at bats. I've got to put myself in positions, right? In the greater, for the greater aspiration of becoming my best self. I know I have potential, but it's very, very scary. But I've learned with having more at bats or more reps, it does two things. One, it helps build the confidence because every step that you make closer to that goal, you've shown yourself you can. And it starts to boost the confidence a little bit. But the bigger thing for me is that failure, which is inevitable, falling flat on my face, sometimes embarrassingly so. The more reps I have, it seems that my bounce back rate is faster, right? I'm not going to. And so now I'm able to see. I've been on the floor before. That hurt. That was a little rough, a little embarrassing, but I'm going to get back up. And I tend to be pretty quick about it now because I've had those reps under my belt. I know what it feels like. The feeling is not atypical. I understand, I recognize, and I move on. And it's not that it's easy, but I will say pushing oneself just a little bit day by day toward discomfort, toward greatness, toward potential. It doesn't need to be a wild leap. It's these little steps in the direction. And it's amazing how much stronger we become little by little. It's the consistency. So I'm thrilled to hear that with you because it's a good reminder that a lot of us out there as entrepreneurs don't have this unabashed, completely unlimited tank of confidence.
Yeah.
Humans, trying to get through it.
Well, I think we, it's like funny when you go through these crossroads, and I think since the pandemic, there's been lots of crossroads, but one of them is like you spend so much time worrying about the results in a way. And, I like work with therapists and stuff like that because I was like, is this right? I'm in the right job. Should I actually go and, being an entrepreneur, you think sometimes, should I go back and take a job? But at some point you get to the point where you can't really go back and get a job because nobody wants to hire you. Then you think he's going to break it all. I don't want that. But it's really interesting how you get these situations where you're really, really assessing yourself and instead of just enjoying the journey, because there's the book called The Alchemist, where there's a sheep farmer goes on this journey and he just enjoyed the whole thing. Is about he's just enjoying that journey and all these great things are happening for him and his life gets better in the end. But we forget that. And also, cumulatively, I came from a sausage trailer selling sausages with my mom's dad, and now I'm involved in the global hospitality industry. That's quite crazy when you look back. But, you worry so much sometimes on the journey, you actually forget to be in that moment, actually get the most out of it. You're just doing in that. So that's really where I am right now as we are exploring around doubt and things like that. How can I actually, as soon as that comes, just park that worrying about if this is the right thing. It is what it is. You are where you are. And you have to work through that. And then you'll see what comes. Whatever you deserve will be handed down. It's a bit like back to the universe. You can influence a lot of things, but you can't decide the results. And I think what the story called Amafati, they call it, where they talk about, whatever is handed to you is meant to be handed to you. And it's your job to deal with it. So it's really, really interesting as you get a bit more gray hair and talk with a lot of great entrepreneurs like yourself. You also start thinking about, actually, it is the right journey you're on. It's your journey and it's the right journey. And you don't have to doubt, but you still do it. Doubt and shame and all these strong words,
I do, but I think this is the perfect segue into the focus that you have on reaching your full potential and the podcast. Okay, so let's talk about the pod. Let's first tell me, when you say the word maverick, like this is in the name, this is kind of what you embody. Like, define that for me and for the audience and why that's so important. And then let's talk about launching the pod.
It comes back to some of the things I already said, but imagine we in a world where, leaders know how to build businesses that do more than make a profit. So they have to make a profit, but also they make a positive impact on people, society, and community. And to do that, You need to dare to be different. And that's in principle the banner the whole Hospitality Mavericks thing came out under. And first, it was actually the idea with the podcast was not really to, be a sales machine in a way it was, but I say, how can you influence the industry without sitting and running a business? So how can you actually do that? And it was really interesting. And the really important with the story here is this was never happened as my friend Ali, who's also been on the show a couple of times, hadn't said to me, I would love to be a fly on the wall when you meet these CEOs and pitch them and hear about their problems. Because the principle I went in and said, so what is your problem? What is your biggest pain? What challenge do you have? What do you think? And asked them a couple of questions like an audit, and often it came out it was a people problem. Funny enough, it always is a people problem. And he said, I would love if you can write like some blogs on this, and you could share that with the world. You don't have to name the companies, but just the learnings. And I started writing some of that. And actually I found out I don't have time for that. And it was not my super skill. Writing is not my super skill. But I'm very good at getting in touch with people and networking and having a conversation. And then my mentor, Chris, was still my mentor, said in 2017, have you thought about what Tim Ferriss does? Like he interviews people and then people can learn from that and you can do a podcast. And then I didn't know what podcast was. I think I heard one podcast with Simon Sinek at that point, on Apple Podcasts or something like that. And that was actually the starting one. It was meant to be 10 episodes. And after we released the first 5, there was such a big traction from the industry on the angle of what great Maverick leaders know and do and how they build businesses for good. That we continued. And now we have 300 something episodes, so both some, weekly episodes that comes out every week at 2:00, which you are a part of, Jennifer, but also there's bonus episodes and special edition things we do. And it becomes this, living thing in a way. And it's become, I don't know how to explain it. I was trying to explain it to a friend the other day. Just asked me, why are you doing it? Because it's become this thing that's bigger than me. I need to do it because I'm in the service of, and it sounds a bit, but of the industry. And I feel there's a lot of people that get so much value on and depend on that. There's a lot of people that's written to me, that advice I got there saved my business, or it made me take a career choice. And then that really becomes the purpose of what you're doing. And I really believe that makes an impact. And then we can move the industry, as I said in the beginning, from where we are now to a different place. So we become, the best place to work, the best place that everybody talks about. Talking about AI in the world we live in now, there's lots of jobs and industries that's going to be really impacted. But hospitality can actually have its moment and show why, the human element of hospitality is so important. And I hope and believe that's what the show can help the industry becoming. I don't know if I actually answered your question, but that's like really where I come from. And then, of course, there's lots of learnings of doing all these episodes.
Well, let's dive into that. That's actually great. So I'm going to ask you if you have a favorite episode, a favorite guest, a favorite story. I want to go there. But before we do that, you have had hundreds of conversations with people in leadership positions on the pod. You've, I'm sure, had hundreds of conversations outside of the pod, just in your career, if not thousands. Okay, for all of us out there, experienced or not, what are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that just continue to come up from your guests? And I'm going to ask you your advice to the rest of us in a second, but what do you hear over and over and over again? The challenge, the problem, or just the I wish I knew? Are there themes that you see time and time again?
There is. And nothing new is already out there. Read Good to Great. It's already out there, just in different format. I just see it in a different way now, and also with my own lens and my own experience. Because one of the things that's very important to say as well, I'm a operator leader at the same time I'm doing this. And I'm actually, if I be very say, what is the ego in this? It's my MBA. It's my lifelong MBA. I learned so much from this. It's insane. But I found out, and we put it actually in a white paper we did over the pandemic, because at that time, that was a good time to do that. We sat down and we started to look at all the episodes. And I think it was a bit more than 200 and something we'd done at that point. And we started looking at, how can we actually start to divide these behaviors, beliefs, tenants, and actually we ended with tenants. We call the 6 tenants, we know. And I think there's actually more tenants, but we haven't put a name on the last one. And I did this world with Nicole Gadsden, who was a very good friend of mine. And also one of the reasons why hospitality, we wrote a blog together actually. And that's where we found out there's mavericks out there doing stuff, and therefore they dare to be different. And that was the starting block. So it's a big, big shout out to Nicole as well. But we wrote this white paper together. And my job was to find out what is it that actually they're doing. So they actually have 6 things they're doing, and not 5. The 6 tenets they follow in some kind of way, and they all find their own algorithm within them. Singermans or Danny Myers or Chip Conley or whatever we talk about in a hospitality context. Peter Pilgrims in the UK, Dishoom. They all find. There can also be not so known hospitality operator. I know in the report we have very known hospitality. There's also small businesses where they do these things. But the 6 tenets is clarity of purpose and direction. So they know where they're going. They have very clear vision. They're very good at getting their people involved in that. And there's the second tenet, which very close to the first tenet, is called graceful growth, is that they don't have growth that harms others. They're in benefit of themselves and society and community. And then, of course, there's a pursuit of mastery. They want to be the best at what they're doing. So think about a coffee shop where they just want to be the world best coffee makers. That's the pursuit of mastery. And that's instilled through the organization. You all know these organizations when you go into them, you meet them, you feel it straight away. There's pursuit of mastery. Then they also have what's called radical transparency. So they communicate with the world. So Singermans, for example, would write about the success stories and how they do it. They have I think it's 48 laws of business. They have shared the power of beliefs in business. Ari have written a number of books. He's been on my show 3 times. He's coming again. So they talk radical about what they do, but also they talk honesty about the supply chains, and they share that information. So radical transparency comes in many forms also to the employees. And then they give the employees a stake in the outcomes. They make the people business people, not employees. They learn them something, so when they leave that business, they can go and do something themselves. A stake in the outcome idea also come from Jack Stack's Great Game of Business. Is about how do you make your people into business people instead of employees. And then they give them freedom to operate. So decision making is put there where the information is, not in the top of the organization, but out where the people are and serving customers. And you will know in a restaurant when the server can give you a free drink without going asking the manager. That's freedom to operate, to give you an example. So these are the 6 tenets they follow, and there's much more to them. And in the white paper we did, there's lots more context under that. And that's what we're continuing working on and developing and trying to figure out how do we actually share that better with the world in a way. And that's the top learnings from the show.
The framework's really incredible because you're right. These are not principles that are new.
No.
We heard them in some way, shape, or form. We read them in books. But if I'm hearing it correctly, you're seeing the consistency of some level of all 6 of these show up in the greatest organizations.
Yeah,
is that right?
And they consistently show up in them. It's not something they just do once and then they do a book of culture, for example, they do it once. No, they come back and revisit. So Ari and Singermans have a 10-year vision, and every year they visit that vision, and they have some key year where they write a whole new vision together as a team. So it's like a system for it. The system that underpins these tenets, they are ingrained in what they do. And all their systems are touching back on this, but they will all have different degrees of living this. And the best of the best are living them to a very high standard. So Singermans is the ones I've found from an external point of view to see they are probably that's the place where I'll say, if you want to go and learn these 6 tenets, go there. That's the place. But there's others also I maybe even haven't met yet. Maybe they're listening to this. Please reach out. We want to talk with you. So I think it's about the continuous improvement they do in this area, and they know they're never done. They're never done improving these areas. It's a constant muscle. You said before, you need to do the reps, And
Yeah.
they see it. They're never done. That's not like a final book. That's not a final algorithm for this. This is just a pursuit on all these tenets.
So the what makes a ton of sense. And to any, entrepreneur, business leader, somebody who's thinking about starting a business, I think people will say, I've heard these principles, I've seen them in action, I've seen them tried to be enacted. But whether your business is seasoned or just an idea on a piece of paper, do you have any advice for leaders to not only take the how to reality, but to your point about keeping it consistently fresh and part of the fabric of how a business operates? Because I think that's the hard part. We can go with our teams and the leadership and go write our values, paint them on the wall. But the truth is, culture is not the words, it's how people behave. How do you make that part of the behavior? And any advice on getting started and keeping it consistent?
Specifically on the culture bit, like I would say, you need to write, or you need to, of course, the founders need to set the values of the business. That's how it often starts. And then there's a starting point. But then you actually need to start inviting, as you go on that journey and evolve, you need to involve your people in defining how those values are lived out. And they maybe not change name. They maybe go from simplicity to simple, or whatever you do. But actually, and then how do you build the right beliefs in, how do you work on this together, and how does the employees have influence on this, because the organization also change. So you from a core is still the same, but actually how you involve your people in that process is very important. And then what many have done with success, they have written what I call a book of culture, and people call them different things. And that's actually the documented in 3D. We did this together. This is what we believe in right now. We might review that every 3 or 5 years, and then we move forward. And that's the rule book in a way. And then people know this is the behavior we tolerate. For example, as an organization I met some time ago, and they had this very brutal belief that they didn't want any dickheads in their organization. It's very clear. But again, you need to understand what a dickhead in their context is. And they're very nice people working there because they look after each other. And if somebody doesn't fit in, they will just automatically be excluded out of that culture because they are not a nice person. So therefore, they will not be there. So again, they have very, very clear and distinctive, and sometimes they're a bit Marmite organization. And I think you would not like to work there because that fit with your value set. That's actually great because that's exactly what they want to achieve. But they're very human-centered, these values, and it's about the better for the humans. But I think what's really key is that they involve their people in developing these things. That's the only way you bring it to life. Because if you just a leadership team sits and decide this is the culture, this is the value, up on the wall, please go and do it. It's not our thing. It's the leadership thing, And I think that's really what you see in these organizations as well. It doesn't mean there's a carte blanche on things, but it's within a control framework.
If you were to give somebody advice, if they were running an organization that, whether it's a startup or not, but is, it's existing, it's working day to day, and perhaps there's something, perhaps there's something left for wanting in the culture, right? And the leadership looks to each other. Is there a way to steer the ship in a different direction when it's already left the dock? Can you reignite a culture? Can you change a culture? And how do you suggest implementing, new ideas or values? Any suggestions? Because I think if I look at organizations, I imagine, at least some of the leaders I talk to, we've got aspirations of how we want to operate, but maybe we're not seeing them come to fruition day to day.
Yeah, and I actually think I think I agree with you. There's lots of leaders that want to do the right things, but they're constrained from the system or the legacy of the organization. And I would say yes, but you really have to dare to do it, And I think it starts with you have to start with doing, the first action is to do something. And I think there's a lot of talk about we want to do cultural change. And I think actually often it blocks because again, when it starts, there's an investment to be done here as well. If you want to change radically how you do things, and I think in the book Good to Great, if anyone haven't read that, go in and read it. There's a couple of examples of companies actually. Can't remember, they were selling they were printing newspapers, and then suddenly they were doing toilet rolls instead because they found out that was a more future-proof business. But that also means they had to change everything within the organization to think. That was a lot of resistance to do that. But again, the leadership dared to act and they showed the way. And I think we saw a lot of great things in the pandemic, where it was really clear the leaders that was leading with values and changed things very quickly and in an effective way and had success and had their people with them. And then the other ones that just was throwing down commands to create that culture change. Again, so it's again coming back to how do you involve your people in this? But I think the really key thing is, do you actually dare to make that change? Are you actually going out to do it yourself? Are you part of that change in a way? Are you showing the way as a leader? Are you the shadow of the leader, I call it as well? And I think actually it comes very simply back to that. Actually, the leaders never take the step really in physically or whatever they need to do. If they're talking about, we want now a culture of open door, I want you to come and say the truth to me, then also you maybe need to start to take the door off to your office so they can hear what kind of phone calls you have.
What a great point. Yeah.
So that's it. And I experienced that myself. A leader that said, I want transparency in this organization. And he said, Michael, can you go and get a screwdriver? I said, what the hell do you need a screwdriver? He took the door off. And we heard every conversation he had, no matter what it was about in that office. And that takes guts, because that's actually doing culture in principle. And then he didn't write anything, but he set a culture suddenly. And suddenly people were sharing much more and was much more transparent, but things was not working. And that's just a very simple example. But I think it comes back to, you need to dare to do, and you need to take the consequences of that as well. It could mean that you will not be there, but then you've definitely done the right thing. And I think in Stoicism, you talk about either you can think about doing the right thing or you can do the right thing.
So tell me, okay, you've had all of these guests on. You might have a favorite episode. You might have a favorite guest, but maybe for the listeners here, are there a couple
your episode?
There you go. Yes, I will last and talk about self-doubt and climbing the hill and hoping that you are that you have figured out, sort of where you're going to, entrepreneurialism day by day. But I want to know, give me some examples of people you've spoken to who embody that maverick culture, the people that have done the hard stuff. I mean, the screwdriver in the door situation is such a great example. Any other stories, anecdotes come to mind where the leaders leaned into doing what was right, even if it was hard, or really showcasing their values through action and behavior?
Yeah, well, it's like, I think every conversation has something. There is gems in every conversation. And it's funny what people get out of conversation. Also, that's the one thing I've learned as well. How does people actually listen? And they listen from the situation they're in and the problems they have. So I think, there's no doubt about, all the people I talk with have given me something. But there's some of these conversations that just, in a way, like our conversation was quite special in a way, but also there was a conversation I did, episode number 10. I did with a guy called Andreas Carlson. And I knew Andreas a bit from before. He's Swedish and he's the CEO of Tingsager in the UK, a very successful, very people-driven organization. And that was like a 101. There were things in leadership I hadn't figured out. And one of them was humility, the kind of level of humility he had for his journey. And the advice he gave, because I asked him about some other business things I was doing afterwards, he said, Michael, stop being so ambitious talking about 1,000 restaurants. That's not realistic. Start with one. Do something that doesn't scale. Be humble about it. Keep your head down. And it just reminds me that actually that thing about where you go out, like when you go out to investors and say, woo, we can do all these things, is not really reality. It's about that humbleness. And then that humbleness, we found out that's really maverick, to be humble in a way. And you see that from Ari, from Singerman's as well, or the whole leadership team there. Many of them actually write the book and then put it out. And then the world takes care of promoting that book for them. Like Ari doesn't push his book. If you don't know about these books, lots of people don't know about it. So that really, that moment. And I think also there was that moment and it could be anyone than Andreas, but that conversation made me think, okay, this was so valuable for me. What does that actually mean for the audience? Because we're actually doing this for the audience in the end of the day. I'm not doing it for the guest's sake. That gives them 50 minutes of, in the spotlight, but it's really about what can the guests get out of this. And I think a lot of people came back and funny enough and said that episode really made an impact on how they thought about their leadership. But that really made me think this podcast has something to give. And I felt I had one of those. Some days you go to work and you have a day of where your world just open up in front of you. You just suddenly see things in a different way. So that will be from my gut, but there's many episodes after that. And it could be from, had an episode with a chocolate maker, Sean Askinosi, and he talked about how he's built his whole business going from a corporate lawyer to go and change lives in Africa. And I was thinking, why the hell I'm not doing more to do things like that? Like, he's amazing. Like, he building a profitable business, and he go and put all the money into small villages in Africa and creating jobs, and you feel a little bit bad, but also that's the way you're learning. So that has a huge impact on me as well. But number 10, like, was my gut feeling was that was a pivotal moment for the podcast.
It really sounds like it, and it embodies so much of what you and I have talked about. And there's threads of familiarity across a lot of the conversations you're having with leaders. But if you had a business leader come to you, and perhaps we'll just be super specific, with somebody who wanted to start a business, getting started, and think back to your brain and your experience in episode 10, right? Where you're getting this advice when he's saying to you, think about things differently. What have you taken away from these 300 episodes where if somebody came to you and said, I want to start a business, tell me what the one or two really, really radically truthful things that you would tell them?
Two. I think I know what it is, because I've written about that, something I need to finish writing and share with people, because it's funny when you get older, you find out that thing again, patience and, put the doubt to the side. But how do you do that? And how do you have the tool to do that? And actually, I found out the other day, a couple of weeks ago, as I was doing a thing, I'm very, what is that? John says to me, you're very consistent, he said. And I think I've fallen in love with the art of mastering continuous improvement. In principle, what McDonald's is built on. That's probably also why I actually thrived in the times I was there. But you need to fall in love with this, because if you want to do something great, you need to show up and do it when nobody watches, and do the same thing again and again and again. And that's what I see as well as I interview these leaders and think back to episode number 10. And now Andreas, at that point, I think he was running, they had 5 restaurants. Now they have 21. This is 2018. It's gone quite fast. But again, it comes from, he's still growing in the pandemic when everybody was shutting down. He was expanding because he was just continuing what they were doing great. So the continuous improvement, just so we all agree on, is that dedication to make these small changes every day, showing up, doing the things that nobody cares about, the boring stuff, and then you trust that will accumulate to something great in the end and become something significant. So there's no one hit wonders. I think that's the very good advice, especially in leadership. There's not one thing you're going to do that's going to make your company great. There's going to be a million things you're going to do. Same building a culture, a million things you're going to put into that culture, into that recipe that's going to make it work. And you can't copy it from anywhere else. So you need to find your own rhythm in a way, and incremental improving that. And you said doing the reps every day. You need to take the push-ups every morning if you want to be good at doing push-up. If you want to be a runner, you need to go and do running. And that adds up over time. And that comes from running a marathon, building a business, opening the best restaurant in the world. That's what they're doing. And I think we need to get away from this earth-shattering improvement within a year, or we're going to break through and we're going to be the next unicorn, all that talk. We need more camels, but that's our elephants or whatever we call them. We need more slow-moving companies to actually stay alive to make a really great impact and create great workplace, because this takes time. Southwest Airlines were not built in a year or 3 years. It's decades of building. So my biggest advice, and what I'd say to myself, and I believe I'm doing right, is that 1% I put in every day to get better. I'm not getting it right. Some days I'm actually minus 2%, and then I'm catching up on other days, but it's 1%, and I'm doing the reps of my rhythm and my habits, if it's in the business or for myself. And then I believe that at some point I'm 37 times better than I started, and that will give me some kind of results that's better from where I am today. So I'm taking my business from where I am today, or myself where I am today, to somewhere in the future. And that's what I would say to leaders. If you can start thinking about not just in your self-improvement, lots of people think about this in their self-improvement, but in your business, and actually give your business time to breathe and implement things, and actually go back to things as well and say, does this actually still work? This book of culture, this recruitment process, or this operation system, is that still in service of the purpose? And actually then improve it slowly and accept that you're not going to build your 24 business systems in 1 year, but it takes time, and you need to give the journey time, and you need to have respect for the journey. And there will be things hitting you that sets you back, but you will not be set that back if you're just focusing on improving 1% every day. You can have success every day. And then the problem is, as I said before, remember to cherish that 1%, because we forget that.
That's fair. But I'm hearing you again say the things that are so perhaps obvious, but so important to say. Do the work and be consistent, and a little bit every day. Can we go Tim Ferriss really tactical for a second?
Yeah.
When you think about, and it could be habits that you have, it could be tactics, it could be hacks, it could just be the approach with which you think about this. When you say 1% better every day, I mean, break this down for us here. How do you actually go into making that what a reality? Is it you have time on your calendar? Is it that you read a chapter of a new book? Is it that you have goals that you've set? Run me through what this tactically feels like on the day-to-day to really be able to ensure that this becomes part of your rhythm, and to your later point, compounds into the greatness, that we want to get to.
Well, funny enough, how I took it down in person level is actually how I've learned it from the Mavericks, in principle. I talked about the 6 tenets before, and you have to have clarity of purpose and direction. So what I've done the last couple of years, I will say, something that's come in, and something also with Ali Gordon has been, I talked about Ali before, my friend Ignition, the journey of the podcast, but also we've done a couple of podcasts. He's an executive coach, and I really worked on my vision for life, because that's the starting point. Where do I want to end, and how I like to be perceived in life? So that's where it all starts. And that is then to, sit and read your vision for life, which probably mine is 6 pages long. I'm not going to do every day. So what I do every day is that I have a schedule for the day where I'm actually touching on the vision of life. And I do some things. I get up in the morning, and I'm an early starter. I get up between 5 and 6. Depending on what's happened the day before. There's some days I'm not doing that, but I'm not like this ultra productivity guy. But 4 to 5 days a week, get up around 5 and 6, and it's quiet in the house. And because I have I have a young family with 2 young kids, and people have kids, know that responsibility. So at some point they will come up, and then it's not that quiet anymore. But I start with what I call power meditation. So I actually set my day doing some kind of meditation action. Sometimes I sit still, sometimes I stand up, sometimes I walk out in the garden, especially in the spring and the summer. And then I do Stoic reflection every day. And I just in principle bought the book Daily Stoic. And then I sit down, read a page in that, and reflect on that, how I live up to that in some kind of way. And then some days I will do a clearance exercise, because we have a lot of noise up here. So I'll just write a lot of stuff down on paper. It could be I need to clean the windows. I need to take the kids to football. I need to do my running today. I'll get it out of my head. So I empty my head. And then most days I will write for 10 to 15 minutes about anything that's on my mind. It could be, we just talked about, the importance of continuous improvement. I'll sit down and write. And that was actually where it got so clear to me. This is actually my thing. This is actually what I'm really good at. So sit down and write. And then I share some of that. Some of that becomes scripts for interviews and so on. And then I plan my day. And I find out which frogs I need to eat, 3 to 5 a day. These are the things that needs to be done. That takes me about 5 minutes. Then I deal with my first frog, because we need to get some excitement. And then I will do something physical. I always do stretching in the morning. I do a HIIT exercise. So it's a quite comprehensive program, people would say. So it's about an hour, but it sets me up for the day. And I do that 4 to 5 times a week. So there's a schedule for that. Within that schedule, also, when I made my coffee at some point in the end of all this, I'm going to make a cup of coffee, because people know that I love coffee. I will have a pint of water, drink that very quickly, and then I will have a cup of coffee. And then I will read a version of my vision for life as my daily affirmation. And I don't know, maybe it's a good idea to give it an example of what daily affirmation is. This is exactly the person I wanted to become. And the first thing I say there, I'm just going to open it here now. I'm already living a great life. I say that, I don't shout in the house, but I say it out loudly. I deserve to say success. I'm start actually priming myself. And that's the last thing to do. And then sometimes I don't do all these things. I maybe do 3 of these things, but the daily affirmation is a key thing I do to really set myself up understanding why I'm doing what I'm doing every day and why I need to continue being relentless on my 1% in a way. So that's in the perfect world, how I would like to do it. And I do it most days, I would say. I put the time aside for it. But it's scheduled when nobody else wants something from me. Because I found out when I tried to do it from 7 to 8, it didn't really work. When I tried to do it in the evening, it's not going to work. And actually, one of the hacks as well is that you need to find when do you stop your day? And that's been a key learning. So mine is 6 o'clock. I try to stop. There will be the odd thing where I'm out to something or I need to attend on something, but really 6 o'clock, I try not to read any more emails. And if I read something at night, it's not a business book. It's it's a novel or something because I need to really restore the brain power. So there's lots of rituals, and I think sometimes some of them are dialed up, sometimes they're dialed down, but these are the ones that's followed me the last decade, and they really work. And that's my toolbox in a way.
It's so incredible to understand this. So thank you for walking us through that, for being so open about it. People talk a lot about morning routines. Everybody's different. But I think some of the things that I've also found super helpful and successful, and I've seen it translate to success in people that I admire. A lot of it is doing fewer things well, right? So there's and even before that, it's defining great and great personal, right? How am I great as a human, as a mom, as a partner, as a friend? And I have the Daily Stoic Journal, which is giving me a prompt every day. And it asks me in the morning, essentially, who do you want to be? And at the end of the day, it asks you to reflect honestly, did you live up to that? And I can't tell you, as simple and basic as just that one page is, for me, when I was really trying to start journaling, trying to really get into this new habit, it doesn't need to be an hour of writing. It doesn't need to be anything that you're going to publish. So for anybody that's maybe wondering how to incorporate that into your life, it could be as simple as, what would make today great? What's one thing that is really, I'm grateful for, and so maybe if you have other prompts for people, I have found that to be really powerful. And the reflection of the day, I can't put a price tag on.
Yeah, and also it's like there's also this thing around, like, for example, meditation, where I've been trying. I can't meditate for 20 minutes. I don't have this. I'm too uneasy to do that. But 5 minutes works for me, and that's okay. And that's like all the things I was talking about before. People think he's mental, but it's actually 5 minutes activities, and I actually now have such a rhythm. Just do them, and sometimes I forget to do one of them. That's okay, but because I do them 4 to 5 days a week. So some weeks I go on holiday, I will not do this. I'm not like insane. Then I'll do the Daily Stoic no matter what. And I will do the stretching and the HIIT exercise no matter what. If it's snowing, raining, holiday or whatever, that's done. But I wouldn't sit and write if I'm on holiday, or maybe that's not time to do it. But that if I could have a perfect day, that will be happening. And that happened this morning, for example. And therefore, I already feel I've won. So it doesn't matter what happens the rest of the day.
That's such a great point. It really does tee you up for success. I think maybe one more thing to add, that just from a perspective, which again, I'm newer at, but to those out there, here's one kind of profound learning I had. And again, this seems so obvious, but I started to keep a journal on my decisions and to understand how I arrived at them, if it was sort of a solo decision or a communal kind of democratic decision, if it was based on data or gut. And ultimately, if it took me a long time to get there, or if it was a quick decision. And it could have been as simple as, I'm trying to think of a good one these days. We just had a big partner that I'd mentioned to you before, right? And it was going to be a huge left turn from the playbook, from the plan, from the pro forma, the budget. And the question was, we needed to make sure we were going to make the right decision. If we made the wrong one, we'd be able to recover, but it was going to be hard. And so that was one example. But another example was thinking through, I have a little kid. How many days per week do I put her in preschool? And again, decisions, right? And so I tried to remove the decisions from my life in terms of what I eat, what I wear, what we make for dinner. We've sort of systematized that stuff to make it easy to not think about it. So there's not fatigue. But those big ones, I was really trying to understand if my intuition was strong. Like, was my gut right? And journaling has helped me take a look back and kind of chart progress or understand patterns. And it's been really informative. And so it's also a good personal test. How good am I at this really? And it goes back to self-awareness, Yeah. So anyway, I'm a huge fan of that. But thanks for
It's really, really interesting, Jenny, because that's all leader thinks they're great at making decisions, but have they actually reflected on those decisions? That's such a key element, because would we be where we are in the world if we all did that every day? I think that's a brilliant tool. And sometimes also we hurt people without noticing because we didn't stop. We're just moving through the organization. I've done it myself. I think I was very considerate leading teams, and I still think but also sometimes I'm so fixated on the mission there will be casualties on that journey. And I forget to go and pick them up again, because you can actually save them, but you actually were just running so fast as a leader because you didn't reflect on the decision. I love that. I just made a note on that. That's a whole podcast conversation about this.
Exactly. But it goes back to self-awareness and understanding that we all have room for growth. But I love that morning routine that you walk through. I love everything about it. Maybe, I don't know how much time we have left, so you're going to have to do a gut check on me. I've got a speed round for us at the end. I also to ask you, I think I've got a good sense of it, but if you had to say out loud, candidly, to this group, what your superpower is, and also in this moment in your life, because it seems like as a forever learner, you're adapting and evolving, that thing you're working on right now. So two ends of the spectrum.
Superpower, you said. There was two questions there, wasn't there?
Superpower, tell me what you just, are innately, it's just a huge strength of yours that you contribute. And then on the flip side, in this moment in your life, because I imagine it'll change from chapter to chapter, what's one thing that you're really focused on improving or optimizing?
Okay, the superpower, I think it's it's a bit of that's not one word, but it's a mix of two things. Continuous improvement. I'm really good at that, but it's mixed in with the ability to change very quickly. I'm not really stuck on these two things, but then I find a new way to be consistent in that change, to make that change happen. And I think, and that's what because I've been asking people, what do you think I'm good at? That's what I'm really good at. And then, of course, doing that with a very human touch. But I think it's really that, again, come back to the continuous improvement and consistency, and then be very quick to change if I actually find out this is not working. This is not really in my favor and other favors to do this. We just need to drop it. Doesn't matter what I've spent the time doing it now. I just change direction. I think I've shown that in many, many directions. But then again, very quickly find out how do we then become consistent within that, delivering the new way in a way. So I think I'm very good at that. No string, to anything really.
Yes. Okay. So on the flip side, what is one thing that you are deeply focused on improving or optimizing right now? And it could be something small, but give us a sense of when you have a self-aware moment or that reflection, you think, you know what, I've got to strengthen this skill, this muscle, this something.
I'm actually, trying to become, I actually said we launched the podcast because writing was not something I really had patience for. But actually, I'm actually working against that now, trying actually to write. And actually there's potentially a book coming out of this, and that's why I write every morning, because it has to be. If I want to be a writer, I have to write every day. If that's, sometimes it's only 10 minutes. It doesn't really matter. Try to write every day on a work day about something. Try to figure it out, actually, just to get more clarity on who I am and what makes me a success and the things I'm doing and what others are doing, to actually learn better and actually get more clarity. I'm actually writing for myself in a kind of way. And that's quite an interesting process to learn to become better at writing, because that's actually quite a hard skill, but it's actually a skill you can take it with you no matter what. It's not something that's going to stop you the older you get. Of course, if you can't use your hands, then of course you're going to have a challenge, but you could then talk it into a mic instead. But there's something about actually getting more clear about your thoughts and writing them down and so on. There's something meditative in that. And I actually don't know what the end goal is, but there might is a book. I don't know. Maybe there's not. Maybe there's. But I'm not writing a book for the sake of writing a book. I'm writing for myself. So that's the thing I'm exploring right now on a personal level.
Do you want to share anything about the potential book? Are there themes that come up, or is this for another episode, another conversation, another time?
Well, the continuous improvement is one of the themes that's come up, and the 6 tenets has come up as well. Under the dare to be different. There is maybe a book in the podcast, and then there might be something about there's come a theme up about leading others. But I think the two strongest concepts right now is continuous improvement on a personal level, but maybe an organizational level. And then, the 6 tenets of what maverick leaders know and do. So that's still unclear, but there's definitely something going on there.
There's something taking shape. Yeah. That's amazing. I cannot stress enough as I get older and again, talk to people who really have they've earned the right for our adoration and admiration. They are continuous learners. I mean, there are probably a number of traits that, great leaders possess, and we can go back to the books that we've all cited before. But there is something about curiosity, open-mindedness, and the comfort with being wrong in the spirit of finding right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so...
And that's really what writing is about as well. Because suddenly the way you think about it when you put it down on paper maybe looks wrong. And you feel, that's actually... one of the things I actually learned, I was writing about something, and it's like, do I actually think I'm that good at listening? So I'm exploring that specific theme right now because, we all think we're great at listening. Of course, when I do interview people on the podcast, I think I listen to them, but I'm really listening. I really understand on a deep emotional level how these people feel and how I make them feel. So that's a different, but that's again, the power of, doing that thing I actually don't like. Again, working up against the stream, against the obstacle. I don't like writing. I'm actually starting enjoying it a little bit, but still every day, I had to catch myself very much this morning. I don't want to do that. And then open my emails. No, close that email inbox again. I need to write now. That's what I'm going to do. And then I have a timer, take my timer and put 15 minutes, and I got 7 minutes in, but got it done. But then again, it's really interesting how you start to assess yourself and how you become a bit more humble around yourself, because suddenly when you write it, you start thinking about it differently.
This is permission for everybody to go try something that they might have thought was something that they like, and just test and give yourself a chance to explore, discover, or if nothing else, learn a little something about yourself. I think that's amazing. Are we at time? Because I have a speed.
We have a couple of more minutes, I would say, because we need to stop in the right way so you can bring it all together. But I think we are running on the high end of time, which I knew would happen.
Which may happen as well. Okay, so before we get to our very exciting speed round, paint the picture for us we talked about the book a little bit, potential book, that's what's coming. For the podcast itself, there was the great why for why you started this podcast, what you were after in terms of, influencing and supporting an industry from a different perspective, sharing voices, lessons, learnings, insights. Do you want to paint a picture of what's coming? Can we?
Hopefully the show is going to continue. We are in the pursuit right now for a headline sponsor, a new headline sponsor. We had a great partnership with Simply for many years. And, as we know, things changes and everything ends, and then we're going to do other things together now. So we're looking for a new headline sponsor, and that really maybe changed the format of the show. That's always when there comes new people to the table. But of course, it's going to be somebody that's aligned with values. We have great conversations with people. And then I think we are looking at how can we bring the community together in a physical format. There's people that's asked for that. So that's actually, we're exploring that a bit. But again, it's me that needs to take some time out for that. And then, of course, the book, and there's other things around how can you actually take all of this great content from people like you we interviewed, and how can we actually share that in this more bite-sized format, and how can we actually use maybe AI to do that. So we're exploring a couple of different things, but we haven't set down on the one thing yet. But one of the big things that's happening right now, who is the partner for the show and in the future from a commercial point of view, because everything costs. And
It does.
Yeah. So.
It does. And how lucky are we to be on the receiving end of that as industry people, to be able to hear the interviews, the conversations. We're in this world that we can be interconnected. We can tap into an experience with somebody very senior, very seasoned at a big place through your podcast. I mean, it's pretty invaluable, pretty amazing. So thank you for doing all that you do. Very excited to hear what's coming. We have a very quick speed round, and then I think we'll tie it all together if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's also, I think people are tired of listening to the host now of the show.
I don't think so, but let's we're going to dig in just a little bit on a few things. These are super quick questions. If you have a fast answer that just comes right to mind, if not, skip. And I think I know some of the answers to these questions, but we'll see. A phrase or personal motto that you live by.
Well, I have 5 quotes I live by, and they also are my vision for life. One of them is here on my mug. It's probably the one I talk about most. Seneca saying we suffer from what's in our imagination more than what's happening in reality. That's a very stoic quote. And we run around suffering all this time. And we talked about that earlier. And that's, I really remind myself every day when I take up my mug and look at that. So that's one of my favorite quotes.
Amazing. In terms of books that you gift, 9 times out of 10, what books are people receiving from you?
Right now, it changes a bit. Right now, it's this one because
a favorite.
The way with Ryan Holiday, and it feels a bit like I'm promoting something that's already a big success. But actually, this book was for many years not a success, and I think I read it before it became. I would think so. But yeah, that's one of my favorite books to give away. And why? Because it really helped me especially during the pandemic. I think I read it 6 times in the pandemic because it was such a brutal time for me and the industry as well, and personal in a business level. And it's just great to see that through history, there's people that's gone through much worse than you. And they're fine. And they did amazing stuff. So what you're dealing with is nothing. So
I try to read that once per year. It's a great read if you haven't added to your collection.
Yeah.
Okay. We did talk about the book, and we did talk about advice. Is there anything today that you really wish I would have asked you so you could share your thoughts with the audience? We hit on a lot.
Yeah. Can Michael actually chill out?
Is there recovery and stillness baked into your system, your day-to-day system?
And I'll be totally honest. My wife, she's not here right now, but she would say, I cannot chill out. And I cannot really. I talk a lot about, moving away from work, and I really have to be so disciplined about it. But one of the things, I can chill out, but I'm very much, it's never good enough. So I'm really struggling with that thing that's never good enough. Coming back to the doubt, I always have to do more, but I'm getting better at it. But one of the things I found out really makes me chill out is actually doing, something I discovered recently. It's really funny. You've done something in your past, like, I've gone down, my son is playing basketball and gone down, and, when we play basketball, we're in that thing, we're in that moment. And that makes me chill, like doing a team sport kind of thing again. So yes, I can, but I really struggle with it. I've been diagnosed before. I've never been an elite soldier, and I don't know how to do that. I have never ever been in the armed forces or anything because I got a knee injury. But I have this kind of thing. I don't stop before I get there. So it's almost like a dog with a bone. And it's a bit of a dangerous thing. So I'm not perfect in any kind of way, but that's really one of my big struggles. But I'm very aware about the elite soldier syndrome on the mission.
Wow, I can see that with you. That's not surprising in the least, but I think it's a beautiful way to wrap everything together, because despite the successes, despite the learning, despite the experience you have under your belt, you have a desire to grow and do more every day. You are not complacent or comfortable with where you are. And that's scary for most people, not a lot of people, I think for most people, to reach above a place of comfort. And so today was such a great example of doing what is outside of the zone of comfort and saying yes to something that is new and different and, really wild territory. So thank you for being open and honest about doubt, how it can cloud our judgment and decision making, to your cup's point, and for leaning in anyway. And so I think, on behalf of the audience, it was thrilling to really understand how you got to this point and understand what makes you tick, to have greater clarity on, why you operate the way you do. But there's such a sense of curiosity and desire to discover. And I think those can be quite novel. And so I commend you and applaud you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you for doing this. It's been great fun, and scary at the same time. And I'm just sitting and thinking now. I'm sorry if there was too much waffling, guys out there. If there's anything I need to clarify, reach out to me. And but yeah, thank you for taking that time to drill down that. And I think I've been learning something. I made a lot of notes as we've been talking. So again, it's been a great learning experience for me. So thank you for doing that. And I'm looking forward to the next thing we're gonna do, because I think there's it feels like there's something we're not done talking about doubt and all other kind of stuff that goes on in entrepreneurial journey. So thank you so much for interviewing me on my own show.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. What a blast.